When someone expects a reaction from you, when they expect your voice, your anger, your pain, your questions, and suddenly it is no longer there, the silence does not feel like peace to them. It feels like punishment. Indifference is not about pretending you don't care. It is about actually reaching a state where you have detached yourself from the emotional strings that once controlled your responses. When you are indifferent, you are no longer a participant in the game. You are no longer waiting for his message, no longer checking his behavior, no longer scanning for hints of affection or rejection. You have simply stepped out of that cycle. And when a man feels that shift, it shakes him far deeper than a block number ever could. Because blocking is obvious, no contact is a clear signal. But indifference is mysterious, unexplainable, and uncontrollable. It leaves him wondering, what happened? Where did I lose her? He can fight silence, he can chase attention, but he cannot fight indifference. Indifference carries a weight because it reflects growth. It tells him that the space he once occupied in your mind has been emptied, and not because you forced yourself to push him out, but because you grew past it. This is what unsettles him the most, knowing that your life has continued, that your smile returns without him, that your energy is untouched by his presence or absence. He expected you to fight for his attention, to demand clarity, to show him that he still mattered. But when he sees you give nothing, when you no longer even react to his existence, it hits him like a storm. Think about the psychology of someone who thrives on your reaction. Every word you send, every emotional outburst, even every tear that falls, feeds a part of his ego. It reassures him that he still matters, that he still controls a part of your heart. But the day you decide not to give him that satisfaction anymore, the game collapses. He can text, and you may or may not respond. He can call, and you may let it ring. He can try to provoke you, and you remain still. Suddenly his power vanishes. The dynamic shifts, and he is left facing himself. That is the sting of indifference. It does not give him the satisfaction of being needed, and it forces him to recognize his own irrelevance in your life. Indifference is not loud. It does not need to make announcements or declarations. It operates quietly but powerfully. Imagine walking into a room where once you were greeted with warmth, with energy, with presence, and now you are greeted with neutrality, as though your presence changes nothing. That emptiness feels louder than any words could. When you once had a hold on someone and suddenly they look through you, not at you, it creates a wound in the ego that is almost impossible to soothe. He will try to make sense of it. He will think about what he lost. He will question why your energy shifted. And in that process, he begins to feel the pain of being forgotten while you remain unbothered. The power of indifference lies in its authenticity. You cannot fake it, because faking it still shows cracks of care. True indifference is born when you elevate your focus from him to yourself. When your mornings are filled with plans, not thoughts of him. When your nights are filled with peace, not replaying his words. When your energy is invested into your purpose, your goals, your happiness. This is when you naturally stop responding, not out of strategy, but because you genuinely have nothing left to give to that connection. And that is when he feels it most. When you no longer even think about how he feels. People often mistake anger for power. They think yelling, blocking, or cutting someone off is the strongest move. But in truth, anger still ties you to him emotionally. Indifference is beyond anger. It is a state where you could see him walk into a room and feel nothing shift inside you. That is power. That is when you have risen above the attachment. He may try to reappear, try to provoke, try to test whether he still matters, but when he is met with indifference, it hurts more than rejection. Rejection is an action, indifference is the absence of action, and that absence echoes longer in the human mind. When you are indifferent, you reclaim your energy. You are not wasting mental space analyzing what he thinks, what he wants, or what he might do next. Instead, you are pouring that energy into your own growth. And ironically, it is that growth that makes him notice you more. He begins to see that your glow has returned, that your spirit is untouched, that your life is unfolding beautifully without him. And that realization cuts deep because it reminds him that he lost not just a person, but an energy and atmosphere, a presence that he once took for granted. The beauty of indifference is that it creates uncertainty. He knows when you block him. He knows when you cut him off. That story is clear. But when you are indifferent, he does not know whether you care or not, whether you would return or not, whether he even exists in your world anymore. That uncertainty eats at him slowly. making him question himself, making him wonder what went wrong, making him realize that he may never have a place in your life again. It is not the absence of you that hurts him most. It is the absence of his influence over you. A man only begins to feel the true weight of loss when he realizes that the woman he once knew is no longer the same. The version of you that he thought he understood, the one who waited, the one who hoped, the one who sought his approval, has transformed into someone untouchable. This shift is not about pretending to be different. It is about becoming different, building a self-image so strong, so unshakable, that he cannot recognize you anymore. And that is where the deepest thing lies, not in your silence, not in your absence, but in your evolution. When you rise into a higher version of yourself, you become a mirror that reflects his inadequacies, and that reflection is something he cannot escape. When you build an unshakable identity, you step into a place of confidence where you are no longer swayed by temporary emotions or temporary people. You stop making decisions from a place of fear or neediness. You stop bending yourself to fit someone else's expectations. Instead, you define who you are, what you stand for, and what you deserve. This kind of clarity frightens him because it means his role in your life is no longer essential. He once thrived on your dependence, on being the one you leaned on, the one you waited for, the one whose attention validated your worth. But when you become whole within yourself, you no longer seek validation from him or anyone else, and that independence is a wound to his pride. Imagine him watching you walk with certainty, no longer hesitant, no longer doubting yourself. The glow in your presence does not come from him anymore. It comes from within you. Your smile is no longer triggered by his text or his attention, but by your own sense of peace and direction. Your silence is not an empty void, but a powerful statement that you are beyond needing explanations. That transformation shakes him more than anything, because deep down he realizes that the influence he once had over you has vanished. You have stepped into a new identity where his approval carries no weight. And in that moment, he faces the reality that he cannot touch you anymore. This unshakable identity is not about arrogance. It is about grounding yourself so deeply in who you are that no one can move you off balance. He may try to test you, to provoke old reactions, to pull on the strings that once worked, but they no longer work. The things that used to make you angry, insecure, or desperate no longer get a response from you. And when he sees that, when he realizes his old tactics hold no power, it creates a sense of loss far greater than physical distance ever could. There is a kind of respect that is born when someone sees you stand firmly in your own identity. Even those who underestimated you, even those who thought they could manipulate your emotions, are forced to acknowledge your strength. And though he may not admit it out loud, he feels it deeply. He feels the shift in energy. He feels the gap between who you were and who you have become. And in that gap, he feels small. That's the truth. When you rise, he feels the distance, and that distance cannot be bridged by charm, by excuses, or by temporary gestures. It requires a level of growth he may not be willing to embrace, and that is why it hurts him more than silence. Your transformation into someone untouchable also creates a sense of longing in him. He begins to remember the version of you that once relied on him, that once gave him power, and he realizes she is gone. He cannot return to her because she no longer exists. That innocence, that dependency, that softness, she has evolved. And what remains is a woman who has tasted her own strength, and once you taste it, you never go back. That is what pierces him most, the realization that he lost someone who is now beyond his reach, someone who grew into her own light. Building an unshakable identity is not only about how he sees you, but also about how you see yourself. When you know your worth, you stop negotiating with those who fail to see it. When you know your value, you stop explaining it to people who refuse to recognize it. That quiet confidence radiates in everything you do. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you live your life. And without even trying, you become magnetic. You attract respect. You attract admiration. You attract opportunities. Meanwhile, he watches from the outside, realizing he no longer plays any role in the new story you are writing. The pain for him is not in losing your presence. It is in losing access to your growth. He once had the privilege of being close to you, of witnessing your vulnerability, of having your attention. Now, he is reduced to a spectator, and that position feels unbearable. He may pretend he does not care, he may act unbothered, but the truth is no man easily accepts that he has been outgrown, especially when the woman he once thought needed him becomes someone he cannot reach. cannot shake, and cannot control. When you take the energy that once flowed toward him, your thoughts, your questions, your emotions, your hope, and you redirect that current back into yourself, something powerful happens. The atmosphere around you changes. He can feel it without you saying a single word. He may not understand why, but he senses that the pull he once had over you is gone. Where before you were tuned into him, watching his movements, analyzing his silences, giving him space in your heart and mind, now you are tuned into yourself. That shift is invisible, yet undeniable. And it creates a ripple effect that disturbs him more than no contact ever could. Energy is not just about what you do. It is about what you allow your inner world to revolve around. For a long time, he may have been the center of that orbit. Every action, every delay, every inconsistency from him shaped your mood. He was the sun in your universe, and you adjusted your light according to how he shined on you. But the day you decide to move that energy inward, you change the balance, you become the sun, and suddenly he is no longer in control of your atmosphere. That realization unsettles him because he feels the loss of your attention like oxygen being cut off. The shift of energy is not always loud. It does not always require dramatic gestures. Sometimes it is simply you waking up one morning and deciding your first thought will not be about him, but about your goals. It is you choosing to invest your evenings, not in scrolling through his social media, but in building something that feeds your soul. It is you pouring into your health, your growth, your peace. And as you make that shift, an invisible cord begins to cut. He feels it when he texts and your response is delayed, not because you are playing games, but because you are genuinely busy. He feels it when he calls and your tone is calm, detached, no longer carrying the longing it once did. He feels it when he looks at you and sees that your light is no longer reaching for him. It is shining from within you. This energy shift hurts him because it forces him to see that he was never your source of power. He was only borrowing from it. The attention you gave him, the emotions you invested in him, the importance you placed on him, those things made him feel significant. But now, without that flow, he is left with his own emptiness. He realizes that what he mistook as his own strength was simply your energy validating him. And when you take that energy back, he faces the truth that he is not as powerful as he thought. There is something deeply unsettling about watching someone you once influenced grow untouchable. He may not admit it, but he notices the glow in your face, the steadiness in your voice, the focus in your eyes. He notices that you are not waiting for him anymore. He notices that your silence is not heavy with hope, but light with freedom. And in that freedom, he feels trapped. He feels the pressure of no longer being essential, of no longer being the one you look to for direction. The very fact that you are thriving without him cuts deeper than any message of, "I don't need you," ever could. What he feels most is the void of your emotional investment. Men sense when a woman's energy no longer revolves around them. They sense when the string is cut, when the connection no longer feeds them. That awareness is like a shadow following him, reminding him of what he lost, reminding him of the power you now carry within yourself. He might try to pull you back with small gestures, sudden attention, unexpected messages, subtle attempts to stir old feelings. But when he meets your calm detachment, when he sees that your world continues regardless of his presence, it weakens him. Because he realizes his efforts no longer have the effect they once did. Directing your energy toward yourself does not only change how he sees you, it changes how you see yourself. You begin to notice your own progress, your own beauty, your own capacity. You start feeling fulfilled not by his recognition, but by your own achievements. And this kind of fulfillment radiates outward. People begin to notice. Opportunities begin to align. Your presence becomes magnetic. And all the while he is left in the background, aware that he no longer has access to the part of you that once gave him power. That quiet awareness burns in a way that silence never could. The reason this shift hurts him more is because it is permanent. Silence can be broken, distance can be closed, but an energy shift cannot be undone once it is authentic. Once you taste the power of pouring into yourself, once you experience life as the center of your own universe, you cannot go back to orbiting someone else. He knows this, even if he cannot articulate it. He knows that the woman who has turned her energy inward is no longer his to influence, no longer his to control. And that truth is the kind of pain that lingers, not because of what you do to him, but because of what you stop doing for him. The silent comparison begins the moment you stop chasing and start upgrading your life. At first, he may dismiss your distance. He may tell himself you are playing games or trying to make him jealous. But when time passes and he sees that you are not pretending, that you are genuinely moving higher, building better experiences, attracting better people, and glowing with a new confidence, something starts to stir inside him. He may not show it outwardly, but in his private thoughts, he begins to compare the man he is with the life you are now living. That comparison is not something you force on him. It is something that happens naturally when you evolve without him. Every picture of your growth, every display of your independence, every sign that you are happier without him becomes a mirror he cannot avoid. He looks at that mirror and sees the gap between who he is and who he thought he was in your life. He may have believed he was irreplaceable, that your world revolved around his presence. But now he sees you standing firm, creating your own joy, building connections that do not include him, and he cannot help but measure himself against that image. And what he finds in that measurement is not pride, it is inadequacy. The silent comparison does not require you to flaunt your life or prove a point. It is not about posting every achievement or showing off every change. It is about living authentically at a higher standard than before and letting that quiet evolution speak for itself. He sees it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you no longer hesitate, in the way your focus has shifted from needing him to building yourself. The silence of this comparison cuts deeper than words ever could, because it speaks to him on a level he cannot argue with. He cannot debate with your growth, he cannot dismiss the evidence of your progress, and he cannot stop himself from noticing. Comparison is one of the most powerful forces in the human mind. People often deny it, but everyone measures themselves against others, especially against someone they once held close. He measures himself against the man you now attract, against the opportunities you now embrace, against the confidence you now radiate. He may try to ignore it, but deep down he feels the sting of realizing that he is no longer the best version of your life. He is no longer the one you look up to, the one you wait for, the one you revolve around. Instead, he is on the outside looking in, forced to confront the fact that your life did not fall apart without him. In fact, it got better. This silent comparison is brutal because it is not confrontational. You do not argue with him. You do not remind him of what he lost. You do not send messages to make him regret. You simply live in a way that shows you no longer need him. And when he sees that, when he compares his current reality to what you represent, it destabilizes him. He begins to think about what he could have been if he had valued you differently. He begins to remember the times he took your love for granted, the times he thought you would never leave. And now, as he watches your elevation, those memories turn into regrets that weigh on him. There is a quiet pain in realizing that someone you once dismissed has become everything you cannot reach. That is the essence of the silent comparison. He cannot escape it because it is not something you do to him. It is something you become in front of him. And that is why it hurts more than anger, more than no contact, more than rejection. Anger can be dismissed, rejection can be brushed off, but silent comparison lingers in his own mind every time he looks at you or thinks about you. It is not your words that wound him. It is his own realization of what he has lost. As you continue to raise your standards, as you continue to attract experiences that reflect your worth, you unknowingly create a gap between you and him that grows wider every day. That gap is not something he can close with excuses or temporary effort, because it is not about what he says, it is about who he is compared to who you are becoming. He may try to step back into your life, he may attempt to regain your attention, but the comparison remains. You are not the same woman he left, and he is not the man who can match you anymore. The sting of the silent comparison is amplified by the fact that he knows you are not trying to make him jealous. He knows it because he sees the authenticity in your growth. He sees that you are not performing for his attention. You are living for yourself. And that truth makes the comparison unavoidable. He is left in a cycle of questioning himself, wondering why he did not appreciate you when he had the chance, asking himself what he could have done differently. And though he may never admit it out loud, those questions echo in his mind long after you have moved forward. What makes the silent comparison so powerful is that it never requires you to look back. You do not remind him of his mistakes. You do not try to prove his absence hurt you. You do not engage in the battle of words. You rise, and in your rising, he feels himself falling. That invisible measurement between your current strength and his stagnant self-image is the quiet punishment that no contact could ever deliver. And while you live free, he carries the weight of a comparison that never fades. Living as if he never existed is not about hatred. It is not about pretending. It is not even about trying to erase memories. It is about stepping into a state of life where his presence no longer defines your rhythm. When you live in such a way, he feels it in the most profound sense, because he realizes that he is not only absent from your physical world, but absent from your inner world as well. To him, this is the deepest wound, because he can understand being ignored, he can understand distance, he can even understand anger. But when he looks at your life and sees that it has unfolded in a way where he is not even a shadow, not even a reference point, he begins to feel the reality of being truly forgotten. That is something no ego can bear easily. When you live as if he never existed, you stop weaving him into your conversations, you stop holding him in your imagination, you stop filtering your decisions through the lens of what he would think or how he would react. He becomes irrelevant to your choices. The dinner you enjoy, the clothes you wear, the dreams you chase, none of it revolves around him. And when he notices this, when he sees that the world you live in is not shaped around him in any way, he feels the hollowness of his absence. It does not matter if he tries to convince himself otherwise. The evidence is there in the way you flourish without even mentioning his name. The reason this hurts more than no contact is because no contact still acknowledges him. Blocking him, ignoring him, staying away, these are reactions, and reactions still mean he holds a space in your decision making. But living as if he never existed is not a reaction, it is a rebirth. It means he no longer factors into the equation of your life. That kind of indifference is not about strategy, it is about freedom. And freedom is what stings him most, because it is proof that you are not tied to him emotionally anymore. When you move forward boldly, your energy shifts in a way that speaks louder than any explanation. He may stumble across your life, whether through mutual friends, through social media, or through glimpses of your progress. And what he sees is devastating to his pride, a woman who is no longer touched by his memory. He sees you laughing in pictures, not with a trace of longing, but with genuine joy. He sees you pursuing goals, not as a distraction, but as a mission. He sees you shine in rooms where his name is never brought up. And each of these moments remind him that he has been replaced, not by another man, but by your self-sufficiency. Living as if he never existed requires you to take back your identity. You are no longer the woman he left. You are not who waited. You are no longer the one who was hurt. You become the woman who defines herself outside of him, who writes her story without his name in the chapters. This kind of reinvention is powerful because it means he cannot trace himself in your success. He cannot claim credit for your glow. He cannot tell himself he is the reason you are who you are now. Instead, he is erased from the narrative entirely, and that kind of erasure is a silent blow to his ego. For a man who once believed he had a lasting effect on you, this realization creates a silent torment. He may wonder if you ever think of him, if you ever look back, if you ever feel his absence. But when he cannot find a single sign of it, when everything about your life projects fullness without him, the thought begins to sink in, he has been forgotten. And being forgotten by someone who once cared deeply for you is one of the greatest pains to endure. It tells him not only that he lost you, but that he lost his significance. What makes this state so powerful is that it is authentic. It is not about faking a smile. It is not about forcing happiness. It is not about trying to cover pain. It is about reaching a place where you truly do not need to reference him anymore. You wake up without remembering him. You plan your days without him in mind. You smile because life itself gives you reasons, not because you are trying to prove anything. And this authenticity is what makes it so undeniable. He knows it is real because he sees no cracks, no signs of you pretending. That reality is far heavier than the silence of no contact. Living as if he never existed also reclaims your time and mental space. Instead of dwelling on his choices, you dwell on your own opportunities. Instead of asking why he left, you ask yourself where you are going. Instead of replaying old conversations, you create new ones with people who add value to your life. This shift in focus builds momentum. And as that momentum grows, your life transforms. He may try to reappear, hoping for recognition, hoping to reignite some memory. But when you greet him with neutrality, when he realizes that he is not even a factor in your present reality, It crushes him in ways that silence never could. What hurts him is not simply that you are moving on, but that you are living fully as though he was never part of your story. That absence leaves him no room to negotiate, no space to argue, no chance to insert himself back into your world. It forces him to see that while he thought he left an imprint, he left nothing lasting. You erased him not with anger, but with progress, and that is a kind of loss that lingers in his mind far longer than any words you could have spoken. When you begin to understand that peace is not the absence of noise, conflict, or distraction, but rather the inner stillness you cultivate regardless of external conditions, everything around you shifts. Silence becomes a tool, a weapon, and a shield. It gives you mastery over yourself and makes you immune to manipulation, pressure, and unnecessary influence. Most people live their lives in constant reaction to what others say and do. They respond to insults. They rush to defend themselves against rumors. They get trapped in the emotional roller coaster of relationships, and they let others dictate their mood and direction. But when you learn to remain still in silence, you no longer play by those rules. Instead, you begin to operate on a higher plane. Silence is misunderstood by many because they see it as weakness, as passivity, or as avoidance. But in truth, silence is one of the strongest positions you can take. It unsettles those who thrive on your reaction. It confuses those who seek to control you through words, and it forces people to confront themselves without the distraction of your energy feeding their agenda. When you choose silence, you are not retreating. You are advancing in a different way. You are reclaiming power from situations where noise and chaos dominate. You are building a strong foundation where clarity emerges, and clarity is what allows you to make powerful choices that shape your life deliberately instead of emotionally. Think about how silence works in moments of conflict. When someone tries to provoke you, their entire strategy depends on you reacting. They expect your defense, your argument, your anger, or your frustration. But when you stay silent, they suddenly lose their grip. Their attempt to control you collapses because they no longer have access to your emotional energy. That silence speaks louder than any word you could say. It tells them they no longer have power over you. This is why silence is so intimidating. People can interpret your silence as disapproval, as wisdom, as strength, or as mystery, but what they cannot do is control it. Silence keeps you unpredictable, and unpredictability keeps you powerful. You must learn to master the discipline of not responding to every call for your attention, not explaining yourself to everyone, and not feeding every conflict with your energy. That restraint is what separates people who drift with the noise from those who move with intention. Silence sharpens your perception. When you are not rushing to speak or to defend yourself, you begin to notice details others miss. You hear not just the words spoken, but the emotions behind them, the motives driving them, the energy surrounding them. This heightened awareness gives you an advantage in every interaction because you are not clouded by your own need to be heard. Instead, you hear deeply, you observe patterns, and you understand people beyond their words. Silence also creates space for your own intuition to guide you. In the constant noise of life, people lose connection with their inner voice because they are too busy listening to the opinions and judgments of others. But when you step into silence, you start to hear that deeper guidance within you. The voice that tells you when to move, when to wait, when to cut ties, and when to act with boldness. That inner wisdom cannot be accessed when you are constantly filling the space with chatter, explanations, or reactions. Silence allows the truth within you to rise to the surface. Another dimension of silence is how it changes your presence. When you master the art of being still, you carry an aura that demands respect without you ever needing to demand it. People sense that you are not easily moved, that you are not desperate for validation, and that you are not controlled by the noise of the crowd. They may not understand it fully, but they will feel it. And that presence often commands more respect than words ever could. Silence makes you magnetic because mystery is powerful. People become curious about the one who doesn't reveal everything, who doesn't rush to be understood, who doesn't fight to be heard. In a world where everyone is desperate to speak and to be noticed, the one who remains silent becomes unforgettable. Silence is also the ground where healing takes place. When you go through pain, loss, or disappointment, rushing to speak, explain, or justify often prolongs the hurt. But in silence, you allow your emotions to settle, your thoughts to process, and your heart to find balance. It is in silence that wounds begin to close and strength begins to grow. The ability to sit in your own silence is what transforms pain into wisdom instead of bitterness. Many people cannot sit with themselves in silence because silence reveals the truth they try to avoid. It forces them to face who they really are without distractions. But if you can endure that process, you will emerge stronger, clearer, and more aligned with your true self. Silence, therefore, is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is the container of strength, wisdom, and clarity. It allows you to preserve your energy, to discern what deserves your attention, and to rise above situations that others get trapped in. It teaches you that not every battle requires your voice, not every insult deserves your response, and not every situation needs your presence.